Alright, what's up, everybody? Back with another edition of Everyday Hoops. Hope you guys are having a good one. Today is another episode of The Look-In. This one is on the Minnesota Timberwolves, who were just eliminated from the NBA playoffs last night after losing to the Denver Nuggets. We're going to talk about them, this season, their future, and all that stuff. This is the 16th episode of The Look-In. If you missed any of the first 15 episodes, just go back and watch them in the playlist on my channel called The Look-In 2022-2023 season. You could just go through all of them, and this one will be on the playlist as well. Thank you guys for the views on the vids and the shorts recently. I really appreciate it. If you do the content around here, consider subscribing, like, turn notifications, do all stuff like that. I really appreciate it. It really helps out a lot. And yeah, there's also another one coming out. It's going to be either later tonight or early tomorrow on the LA Clippers, because they were also eliminated last night. And there's some more coming, as teams get eliminated from the playoffs, these videos will be coming out. So yeah, don't want to waste any more of your time. Let's get right into it. So Minnesota this season, they finished 42 and 48th in the Western Conference. They were in the play-in. They lost the first play-in game to the Lakers. They blew that game, but then came out and dominated the Thunder in the 8-9 game to get to the play-in and play the 1 seed Denver Nuggets, and they lose that series in 5. Very weird season for Minnesota. In the offseason, they make the big trade for Rudy Gobert, where they gave up a lot of their future, basically all their first-round picks. Walker Kessler, Patrick Beverley was a big part of their team last year. Jared Vanderbilt, Malik Beasley were also big parts of their team last year. Gave all that up for Rudy Gobert, and the season started very slow for them. They were hovering around like that 11 12 seed for a very long time. Rudy Gobert and Cat wasn't really working together. Anthony Edwards, everyone projected to make this all-star jump. It didn't happen at first because Rudy Gobert was in the paint. It was just a lot of weird moving parts for Minnesota. They're still trying to figure out how this all worked together. And the first 2 months of the season, 2 or 3 months, it just didn't look good. It just looked bad. And then Karl Anthony Towns gets injured here. It's his calf. Misses, I think, 50-something games. And that really was supposed to put the wrench in Minnesota's season. But then the Timberwolves step up, and once January hit, they start playing really well. Anthony Edwards starts taking the leap that we all projected him to be. He becomes an all-star. Rudy Gobert looks a little bit better. Kyle Anderson, Jaden McDaniels, guys like them are taking big steps. Then at the trade deadline, they make the big trade that got them Mike Conley. They gave up D'Angelo Russell and got more veteran piece in there. Karl Anthony Towns comes back. They win their last few games of the regular season, and they make the play-in. And then you know what happens after that. But a very weird season for Minnesota. And I think a lot of people are looking at the Timberwolves as this kind of team that's stuck, I guess. I don't know. Maybe kind of stuck. Maybe kind of I feel like they're in a way better position than a lot of people think. Now, I don't mean they're going to be championship contenders next year or anything like that. But I think they're in a very good position. I like their team, but I definitely think they still do need some work. Let's get into the individual players for a second. We got to start with Anthony Edwards. Came into season number 3, projected to be all-star, big level jump. It didn't hit that at first, but then once January hit, he really started making his strides, and then he became a first-time all-star this year. He has some big moments, has some great moments, and then the playoffs as well. After having a disappointing plan, he came out in the playoffs after Game 1 and just showed why he's a star, and he's going to be a star for Minnesota, and he's their number 1 now. I feel like there's kind of a question of when is Anthony Edwards going to take the number 1 over Cat? It is now. Anthony Edwards is the number 1. He should be the number 1, the priority in Minnesota. If that's not clear after this year, I don't know what more clarity they need. Finished averaging just over 24.5 points per game with 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal. He shot 46% from the field, 37% from 3. He just took real strides. Score, being more consistent. Defensively, he was very good as well. But also off the court, as more of a leadership type role, I feel like. He just looks more mature and is more of a leader over there in Minnesota, which is big, for that team, because they don't have that many leadership type roles, or they do, but they have very different leadership roles. And so if they have a young 21-year-old Anthony Edwards kind of taking that strides of wanting to be a leader, that is huge, especially if he's going to be the face of the franchise. But yeah, I really like Anthony Edwards. He's going to be amazing, and hopefully Minnesota can keep building this team around him, and he could be the focal point of Minnesota for the future, because he's their building block, man. He's their building block. He's their key to being really successful. Next, we're going to talk about Karl Anthony Towns. Only played in 29 games this year because of injury. He averaged just under 21 points per game with 8 rebounds and 4 assists. He shot 49% from the field, 36% from 3. And he had some moments when he came back near the end of the year where he looked good, playing to look good. But then the playoffs, he kind of really struggled until like game 5. And at that point, they're already down 3-1. And I honestly think Minnesota has to have a real conversation about Karl Anthony Towns and what is he to this team. I don't think I don't think he can be the franchise guy. I don't think he's number one over there in Minnesota anymore. I think that's Anthony Edwards' crown. I think now Minnesota has to start looking at Karl Anthony Towns and be like, all right, can we just have him consistently be good enough to be our good number 2? Because Karl Anthony Towns is, don't get me wrong, he's an all-star, all-NBA level player. He has the potential to be, but it's just injuries and just lack of aggression, I feel like sometimes, that really hurts him from being in that top tier. Karl Anthony Towns should have been the guy from Minnesota, the face of the franchise, the future, in the conversation with Joel Embiid and Jokic, because he has so much talent, but it's just, I feel like he doesn't have that hunger to be like, I want to be the number 1 guy. He just kind of sometimes just looks like lost out there and just doesn't look like he wants it enough. So I think they have to look at him as the number 2 and kind of try to evaluate him as like, all right, how good can he be as a number 2 guy to complement Anthony Edwards? Because it'll actually be really nice if he can do that, be number 2, because he has so much scoring ability that if Anthony Edwards is now getting double teamed and people are starting to look and lock in on Anthony Edwards, you got a guy like Karl Anthony Towns who can come in and give you 25 if you need him to by hitting some threes and getting some easy buckets. Very tough though because he did lose a lot of seasons to injury. The other guy I was talking about, Rudy Gobert, the guy who they made the big offseason acquisition for. He played in 70 games. He averaged 13 points and 11 rebounds with a block per game. Shot 66% from the field, 64% from the free throw line. Still a very weird fit. I feel like at the end of the year, they kind of started to figure out a little bit more how he could fit into this team. But it's still very weird and still has a little bit more gelling to do. Not just on the court, but off the court, I feel like as well. On the court, it's just so tough for him because he doesn't have any offensive skill. Like his offensive skill is him being 7'1", so he's just gonna get easy layups and dunks because of that. Teammates are just gonna find him, and he's gonna get offensive rebounds. But it's very tough to give him the ball and have him do anything with it unless it's a lob. So it's very tough for that. And then defensively, he did not look like the same Rudy Gobert that we know. He didn't look like the same Rudy that was a multiple-time defensive player of the year. The whole reason why the Utah Jazz are the number 1 seed and why he was traded for so much value, because defensively himself, he was a top-tier defense. And this year, it just didn't look the same. People were attacking him more. He didn't block as many shots, and it just didn't look that great. I still think I'm not on the trade Rudy yet. I still think we got to see another year and a fully healthy year. Again, because Karl Anthony Towns was injured, and they brought in Mike Conley late, and Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert have a connection. So I think next year's a big year to see what Rudy Gobert is and how he could fit with this Timberwolves team. But still has a lot to be determined. And then off the court as well, he has some drama with Kyle Anderson at the end of the year, and then D'Angelo Russell saying things about Rudy Gobert, and that's not good as well, especially with a young team that the Timberwolves made this move because last year they were in the playoffs for the first time unexpectedly, and then Timberwolves were like, all right, now we have to capitalize on it now. Go trade for Rudy, and you're supposed to be the piece that brings them to the next level, and you're the one that's the problem, kind of. But hopefully he can bounce back. And the one reason why I really think the Minnesota team isn't as bad of a place as people think, because their role players are pretty good. Mike Conley, again, he is 35, but when he came to Minnesota, he kind of fit what they needed, kind of just a veteran presence that just does the little things as a point guard. He averaged 14 and 5 assists with a steal. He shot 46% of the field and 42% from 3 in his 24 games in Minnesota, especially late in the play-in and the playoffs. He really showed his value because early he wasn't really taking a lot of shots, but he was starting to find his rhythm. A guy that gets everybody involved, and a vet that knows the league and gives some help to Anthony Edwards, and is a guy that's not afraid to defer to Anthony Edwards and doesn't want to get his own shot up or get his own all the time. Jaden McDaniels is probably one of the better wing defenders in the NBA right now. It really sucks that he broke his hand at the end of the year and couldn't play in the play-in or playoff game because maybe things will go a little bit differently. But he averaged 12 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, almost a steal, and a block per game. He shot 51% from the field, 39% from 3. He's definitely a guy to keep around. They really need to keep him around defensively. I mean, especially if you're going to have the Towns and Gobert lineup. Towns isn't, probably mobile or great enough on his feet to guard the wing. And with Anthony Edwards having a lot of his play offensively, a guy like Jaden McDaniels in there on the wing to be the wing stopper is huge, especially with him being so young. The only thing, he's got to stop fouling. He averages almost 3.5 fouls a game. You got to bring that down a little bit if you want to keep being a defensive stopper. But yeah, and then offensively as well, he has a lot of skill. Big, what is he, like 6'9", 6'10", could shoot over people. Pretty solid three-point shooter. Like, Jamie Dino's got the talent to be really, really, really good. And him being in Minnesota with Ant and Carl-Anthony Towns is just a great, great piece to have for them. I like to see how he develops. And then Kyle Anderson, of course, he did have the drama with Rudy Gobert and all that stuff. But Kyle Anderson kind of really was a big key in turning this Minnesota Timberwolves team around. He played in 69 games. He started in 46 games because of Cat's injury. And he averaged 9 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and a steal. Shot 50, 40, and then 73% for the free throw line. He's just a dude that just high IQ wing that can do it all. He can handle the ball. He can make the right passes. Really solid defensively, rebounding, shooting is solid. Like, he just doesn't really do that much wrong on the court. And a lot of teams, especially playoff teams, need a guy like Kyle Anderson. Very interesting to see what happens after this season, to see if he still stays in Minnesota after the whole incident that happened with Rudy. But it sounds like they got to keep him. I mean, he's such a big part of this Timberwolves team. It'll be very sad to see him go. But then they also have, some free agency things to decide. And the big one is Naz Reid. He will be a free agent after this season. He averaged 11.5 points, 5 rebounds, and assists. Shot 53% from the field, 34% from 3. Kind of had a big coming out this year. He's been like this throughout his entire career. But I think this year was the big year where people were, like, noticing, like, oh, shoot, Naz Reid is actually, like, pretty good. Especially, I mean, with Cat being out, he got a lot more minutes. But Naz Reid is a very good big man. Naz Reid is very good. He does a lot of things. As a big, he's not 7 feet tall. I think he's like 6'8", 6'9". But he just has a big body. Can score from a lot of different places. Hits the three. Has some handle. Gets to the rim. Good finishing. Good passing. Like, Naz Reid has a lot of tools in that toolbox. And it's very confusing that Timberwolves didn't trade him at the trade deadline, knowing he was going to be a free agent. And at that point, his value was probably the highest. So now he goes into free agency and probably leaves. I won't be surprised if he does leave Minnesota. Maybe goes to another place where he gets a lot more opportunity. But, yeah, interesting to see what they do with Naz Reid. The Timberwolves also have a lot of interesting pieces I like to see what happens with. Jalen Noel, their backup guard. He averaged 10 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. He's kind of a shooter, or like a bucket getter type of guy. Come off the bench and give you 15. I would like to see him get a lot more opportunity, I think, because I think Jalen Noel could be very, very solid. But he still has a lot more developing to do, obviously. Torian Prince is very solid. Nickeil Alexander-Walker came over, and at the end of the year, in the play-in and playoffs, really showed his value. He was hitting threes, playing some really good defense, so want to see what they can do with that. Minnesota has some very interesting pieces, and I think Minnesota is in a pretty solid position going into next season. Very interested to see what they do with Chris Finch. I think next year's a big year for Chris Finch and his job, to see what Minnesota does. Chris Finch is very solid. He does make some questionable decisions, but he's very solid. So we'll see what happens next year. I won't be surprised if next year they're not as good. He might be on the out in Minnesota, but I think they definitely should give it one more year. So yeah, in the offseason, Minnesota Timberwolves like to see what they do. They do not have their draft pick this year because of the Gobert trade. You don't know, but I just cut this out of the episode. I literally talked 3 minutes about who they can draft, and I just remembered, oh wait, they don't have a draft pick. So never mind that. Free agency, like to see probably some more veteran guys with this team. Probably another backup bid because Naz Reid is going to go. Like to see another guard. I think maybe they can bring in maybe another backup point guard, because Jordan McLaughlin was their backup point guard, but he didn't play a lot, even though Jordan McLaughlin's very solid. So I think maybe a nice young guard can be good. Some wing shooters, maybe some bigs that can, some guys like maybe some fours that can defend. So maybe when Conte Towns gets in foul trouble, they don't have to slide Jaden down. They can, and then they can bring in someone else, another forward, and there maybe like a small ball four as well. So that when Rudy is out, they can have Towns at big and then run someone at the four. I think that would be very good for them. But I think Minnesota's in a very decent position. I think next year, what I expect from them is maybe to be around this, but look a lot better. Like this year, they're 42 and 40, but they didn't look like a convincing good 42 and 40. I think next year they're probably, hopefully, I think a little bit better. I think maybe the 1 year of gelling and getting to know each other hopefully increases the chemistry, and hopefully next year they can come in with a full year of Mike Conley and Jaden McDaniels being Jaden McDaniels and Kyle Anderson being good, and maybe Nikhil Alexander Walker gets some playing time in the regular rotation next year after this playoff and playing series, and maybe they add another one or two wing stop or a backup guard. I think this Minnesota team can be very solid. You know, a team that kind of a dangerous team, maybe like around a 4, 5, 6 type of range, maybe a little bit out of the play-in. Because I don't know. Look at this team on paper. This isn't a bad looking team. Like this looks like a very solid, a playoff team. They didn't play like it until the end of the season, but I think with another year, a full year of this team, I think they can be back into the playoffs next year and be a very dangerous team. You know, especially with Anthony Edwards performing the way he did in the playoffs. We've seen that the bright lights, he could still be really good. But yeah, that's it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Once again, if you like the content, consider subscribing, like, turn on notifications to also hit that. I really appreciate it. Really helps out a lot. Go check out the other looking episodes. I'm doing one about the Clippers next, and maybe about some other teams depending on what happens tonight, because there's some more elimination games happening. So a lot of these will be coming out frequently. And yeah, I will see you guys tomorrow.